Today I just thought I would go over the English translated works of Yoshihiro Tatsumi. This is not a retrospective on his career. I am not qualified to speak at length about this. However, if you do want to read an excellent write-up about the career of Yoshihiro Tatsumi, Ryan Holmberg wrote a very lengthy piece in the Comics Journal. I think it's March 15th, 2015. You can Google it, find it. It gives a great overview of who he was as an artist and his impact on manga, and really gives a lot of great insight. This is just me going through the books that were published featuring his work that were translated to English. Mr. Tatsumi died in 2015 at the age of 80 or 79, and I really became a fan of his work. And so over the few years, I've picked up all the books that I know of that has English translated work in it. So we're just kind of going to go through chronologically the books and any small comments I have about them. And hopefully you'll find it of interest. And maybe if you're not familiar with his work, pursue it. And if you are, maybe there's some books here that you're not familiar with. The first book that featured English translated work of Mr. Tatsumi is this, The Goodbye and Other Stories. This was published in 1988 by Catalan Communications, a Spanish publisher. And the infamy or lore of this is that Catalan had a licensing agreement to print a Spanish version of this, but they went ahead and did an English version as well without the rights and without letting Mr. Tatsumi know. Apparently he did not know that this was in English until many years later. So this is an official bootleg. And what I like about it is that it's a larger size. This is the size of like a typical manga book. So it's larger size. And for being over 25 years old, the quality's pretty good. You can find these on eBay. Well, you're going to see some of the glue starting to, kind of like show up here. Also, in some of the volumes, you're going to see on the initial first couple of pages, or first page, you're going to see a little bit of this yellowing, this age yellowing. Some are lighter than others, and some are very yellow. I spent quite a while looking for this. I actually got this for a good deal. This usually runs between $25, $30, but I got this for $20 on eBay. And what I found was this is probably as good as it gets unless someone kept one in temperature controlled conditions. But after that, everything is nice and white. And it's funny because they do this real introduction to manga, because they're trying to educate people who are not familiar with manga back in 1988 with the art form. And so what I liked about Tatsumi's stories from this period, from the 70s, is that he was writing these stories during Japan's post-war boom, but he really writes a lot about the underbelly of Japanese society, about repressed desires, about some of the things that aren't being taken care of, either by the post-war boom or issues that are resulting from that boom. So this is a great collection of that series. It's kind of dark. I don't know if it's bleak, but it can be. But at the same time, it's very good. I really enjoy this series quite a bit. There's mature themes in it, obviously, and it's a great book, as I said. And this cover, just so you know, if you ever see this online where you see like this light pattern here, this is not damaged. This is the way the book is actually, the cover's supposed to be, from what I can tell from seeing tons of covers online and looking for this book. So this is a great introduction if you can find one at a good price to his work, and it's also larger, so it's easier to read if you have old eyes, or just easier to read in general. So you'll have to go 15 years after this publication to find this, the Drawing Quarterly 2003 Annual. Drawn and Quarterly used to do these annuals, and this is the last one they did. And these are oversized as well, nice oversized paperbacks with the French flaps. They feature primarily Canadian cartoonist work. I really enjoy these. I have the last three. I got the last three great deal from Chris Pitzer from Ad House Publishing fame. And this is where you see one story translated, and it's called Kept. And of note is that the letterer is Adrian Tomino. Now, Adrian Tomino was instrumental in getting Tatsumi's work published in the United States. He considers Tatsumi an influence on his style and the way he approached comics. And this is like the first Drawn and Quarterly story that they published in English. It's kind of bleak, kind of dark, but it's an interesting story. I love how Tatsumi uses this everyman character, because he'll have this same character, but it's like they're different characters, but this same face and the same look. It's like the everyman character that he created. Short story is fun. The rest of this book is great to read. There's a lot of good stuff in here, but I principally got this for the Tatsumi story. Now, next, in 2005, we start having this several years run of Drawn and Quarterly publishing Tatsumi's work. The first volume that was published was The Pushman and Other Stories. This is the original hardcover edition. You can find these in paperback. They're not hard to find. I just prefer hardcovers if I can get a good deal on them. And this is before everybody became educated, and this is actually left to right. Again, you see this is stories. These books are very well made because, you know, this Drawn and Quarterly, and has every man character, and they're all different walks of life. They're rich people, they're poor people, they're laborers. Mostly they're not, but mostly they're the everyman, the common man. So this came out in 2005. And these hardcovers are in great shape. This is almost 20 years old, and this looks basically like new. But the paperbacks are, I'm sure, also really good quality. The printing is really good on this nice white paper. The blacks come out really well. I just enjoyed this. Then in 2006, you had Abandon the Old in Tokyo. And this is another collection, just like this. This is a collection of his early 70s work that, again, touched upon a lot of the underbelly of the Japanese economic boom. All types of... It deals also a lot with, when I talked about earlier about the ramifications of the post-war boom. There's also people that are stressed, some people that are kind of pervy, some people that just aren't sure of their place in this new Japan. Again, printing is excellent, great paper, great printing, just another lovely series of stories, And then in 2008, you had Goodbye. Now, I'm going to bring back the Catalan edition because most of the stories, including Goodbye, it's a very mature themed story. Most of the stories, these books contain many of the same stories, but there are stories in here that are not here, and there are stories in here that are not here, and that's why I bought this one, because the stories that are here, not here, are not in any other U.S. translated work that I'm aware of. So, but many of the stories overlap, so you're not missing all that much, but you're missing a few if you don't get this. So this is, again, Tatsumi, more introductions, more information, some great stories in this one. Really good stories in this one. Just love the style, great use of blacks. really interesting stories. Feel very real. Feel very much like, how can I say it? They're realistic, but they're not a lot of times happy endings or just people struggling to get by. Then in 2009, Drawn and Corley published A Drifting Life, and this is considered an outstanding graphic novel, and I agree, this is one of the best graphic novels I've ever read. This is his autobiography up until, I would say, the late 50s, and then it jumps forward to the 90s. And it's an outstanding book. It's really interesting because it's his autobiography, but he also talks about events that happened in Japanese history, like when the Japanese surrendered, how old he was. It talks about how all these young Japanese boys really got into manga that was being published and beginning to be published great volumes after the war, and how him and his brother started drawing manga and submitting them, and you would submit these stories to the manga magazines, and they would list like the best ones and then honorable mentions, and people were trying to get their stories like noted, and if you got a certain prize level, you actually got money because these books sold incredibly well. So this is a great book because it talks not only about him growing up, all these young Japanese reading manga, but then eventually his creation of what was called Gekiga, and actually has him meaning Tezuka, and he has great admiration for Tezuka, but he ended up creating a type of manga called Gekiga, and Gekiga is really like action-oriented manga, because most manga up until like the late 50s was more for kids. It was about sports. Maybe you had Astro Boy, you had science fiction. It was really aimed at kids. And he created a style that was aimed more at, let's say, older teens or adults, more action, maybe more film noir sensibilities. And even at the time, there were a lot of people that were like thinking, well, this really isn't manga. And if I remember correctly, I don't think Tezuka was really all that keen on Gekiga as an art form, because it wasn't like the shonen style, which is funny because later on, Tezuka in the 70s and 80s did very adult themed manga that you could say were maybe Gekiga like, and they were excellent graphic novels. They're probably some of my favorites. But this is an outstanding story. This book hasn't been published, printed in years, so therefore they're hard to find. They usually run in the 40s. I bought this, I think, during the pandemic or right after the pandemic, and the price wasn't too bad. But these books, I wish Drawn and Corley would republish these. But then again, back in 2009, the price was $34.95. So if it had to be published again today, it couldn't, if it was going to be around that same price point, or maybe $39.95, you'd have to cheapen it somehow, or maybe make 2 volumes, just because of inflation. But still, I wish this was more accessible to more people, because this is really an outstanding graphic novel, just an outstanding story. It's about 800 pages, a little over 800 pages, or close to 900, and it never gets old. And I cannot recommend it any more than I just have. Just an outstanding book, and anybody that's read it will tell you the same. And in 2010, Drawn and Corley published Black Blizzard. Now, Black Blizzard was the first Gekiga manga that Tatsumi created, and it's basically the story of a young man who's a pianist, and he's been accused of a murder, and he's like, well, I'm going to tell you the story about what really happened. But as you can see, there's more just narration. There's train, like rough looking characters. This is not like aimed at little kids. This is aimed at, just more adult or people looking for something a little bit more grown up. Basically, this man and this convict are together, escape a train, and so their kind of lives are interwoven. But they obviously, this guy's a criminal, and this guy's a guy who's just caught in this circumstance. So it's an interesting story, and it's got a very film noir type of sensibility. These are hard to find. This was published, and I don't know how many times it was printed, but these are hard to find. This is very expensive if you find it, brand new quality. This was a library copy, but if you look for one, there's none that are new, but if you look for one, they're like in the 40s and 50s. I got this for much cheaper. Didn't realize it was a library copy, but it really wasn't bad. I just wanted the book. If I find one that's in better shape for a reasonable price, I may pick it up and replace this one. But this is hard to find, and that's the problem with these Drawn and Corley books. Black Blizzard and A Drifting Life are hard to find. These ones, The Goodbye, Abandon the Old Tokyo, and The Pushman, because they were published in hardcover and then they were published in paperback. In my opinion, they're easier to find, not easier than these two. So that's another thing about his works. It hasn't been printed in so long, and when I say so long, I'm talking about 10 years or so, that the only way you can find them is in a used bookstore or online, and it's a shame. Also in 2010, AX Alternative Manga 1 was published. I think there's only one volume, and this was published by Top Shelf, and this is a collection of a few dozen short manga stories, all different art styles, all different type of themes. None of it is shonen or young people, friendly. A lot of it's just alternative. I think that back when they started seeing the popularity of like Tatsumi and all this and this more adult manga, you saw a lot of this being published. But I think part of the problem is that I don't know if there was enough of an audience for it then. Maybe now there would be, but I think then they were publishing all this stuff, but I don't think it caught on as much as it should have. I think in my opinion, a lot of the manga is being read by younger people, and maybe some of them could get into this type of work, but not all of them. But the reason I bought this, and I've been looking at this for a couple of years, is that it includes one Yoshihiro Tatsumi story, Love's Bride. And the rest of the stories, there's some really good ones, and there's some hits, there's some misses, lots of messes, a lot of weird stuff. But it's an anthology, so that's the way it goes. But this is the last one, no, the second to last one that I bought in my pursuit of Tatsumi stuff. And I picked it up earlier this year. Pretty good price. And there's a lot of them printed. This was printed by Top Shelf back in 2010, as I said. It's just, there's a lot of them printed. It's just because they're old. I got this for like $20 plus shipping, which is actually a little bit cheaper. These usually run between $25 and $30 plus shipping. So that's the thing about finding these books. If you want to get them a good deal, you got to really shop around. The next book that was published was 2012, again by Drawn and Corley, Fallen Words. And this book is different in style by Tatsumi. This actually is inspired by the Japanese storytelling technique called hakugo, which is actually translates into fallen words. And it's more about stories. And these stories kind of like something can be a little bit more lighthearted, more like play on words type of story. They're not like his 70s style. And you can see the art's a little different. The lines are a little bit thinner, like you would see in A Drifting Life. He created this in his 70s. And this was the last one I finally got. These books are also expensive because they were printed once. The introduction is by Yoshihiro Tatsumi, and there's actually notes regarding the certain terminology, certain phrases, just so to allow you to understand this, these stories a little bit better. This was the last one. I actually read it in the library, and then I finally decided to hunt around and pick this one up. Again, it's over 10 years old, hasn't been printed in a long time, and it's expensive because there's an audience for it. There's not enough books. Drives the price up. So in 2013, let me lower this for you. There was a collection published by Landmark Books, a Singapore publisher, in English called Midnight Fisherman. And from what I can tell, it's a little smaller than your typical manga volume, but it's, decent size. But from what I can tell, none of these stories were translated in any of the other English translated collections. So I remember getting this in 2021 through Amazon. It was through a bookseller that had a storefront at Amazon that was based in the UK, and it was available nowhere else. Then I saw for a while it was based in America, so it was easier to get, but now it seems to be harder to get. Again, this is over 10 years old, and this features more of Tatsumi's, I would say, 70s work, but somewhat different thematically. I mean, similar with that noir, that underbelly, and all that, and that darkness. But at the same time, some of the stories are a little bit different they're not redundant. And that's the thing about his work. The mood and the tone are similar, but the stories are not redundant. They're all different. So there's no, so it's not like, okay, another one, I'm reading this again. So this was, and this book actually has, sexual violence. It has, stories dealing with economic repression. Just a whole different gamut of storytelling. I wouldn't say styles, but let's say situations and characters. And so this wasn't terribly expensive, but again, it's just one of those things that's hard to find because it's over 10 years old, and I'm going to just keep saying the same thing over again. It's over 10 years old, and there hasn't been printed in years, so just trying to find it and get your hands on one is a little bit difficult. It's a great collection, great series of stories, well made, well printed. It looks really great. And finally, we have the Drawn and Quarterly 25th Anniversary Collection. I picked this up earlier this year. This is a mammoth book. I got a pretty good deal for it, but it wasn't super cheap. But this is a mammoth book, and I've mentioned this book on a previous video before, but it's an incredible collection of different pieces and different creators who've all been part of Drawn and Quarterly. Just really interesting collection. It's going to take me forever to get through this. I'm going to do it little by little. But the reason I got this book is that one of the artists that they focus on is Yoshihiro Tatsumi. And I know smoking's bad for you, but I love these like 1950s, 60s pictures of the guy with a cigarette in his mouth when smoking was cool before we realized how much it would kill you. The reason I'm including this is that apparently in 2014, I believe, Chris Oliveros was in Japan, and he met with Yoshihiro Tatsumi, and he had with him a large number of pages. He was working on a sequel to A Drifting Life, an autobiography. It was a sequel, and so they printed about 28 pages or so here. There's a little bit of a teaser. Fortunately, Mr. Tatsumi, as I mentioned earlier, died in 2015, so this was never completed, and it's a shame. But I did buy this because this is the last of his books that I'm aware of, or last of his works, that I'm aware of that were translated to English. And it looked interesting too, because he would do this thematically with this Drifting Life and with this story where they would show some event and then like where they were and kind of use the event as a marker of time in history and saying the year was this or the year was that. It's like this is one of the Sputnik. This is like the second or third Sputnik launch. So I just found this interesting. And it looks like it just continues right after the events of A Drifting Life. If you find one of these for not too much money, it's a great collection. Everybody that's worked with Drawn and Quarterly is somehow represented. So you talk about Seth, Chester Brown, Tatsumi, as I mentioned, Tomina, Chris Ware, Linda Berry. The list goes on and on and on and on. So you may want to check this out if you're a fan of that era. And that is all of them. I want to thank you for your patience. I've read all these books. Well, I mean, I've read all the Tatsumi stories. I still have to finish the Drawn and Quarterly book. But I've never been disappointed with any of these stories. His place in history as far as making more adult-themed manga is something that sometimes is very much overlooked. But he was the first guy to do it and persevered, even though a lot of people didn't buy into it. When his books came out in the mid-2000s, he actually attended San Diego Comic-Con in 2006, and he was actually invited to TCAF and attended TCAF in 2009. And I think from what I understand, he was never like didn't have a big following in Japan. So it was sort of like he finally had his like big moments in his career in the United States late in his life, and it was really good to see that happens sometimes. And like I said, all these books are available on eBay. A lot of these books, especially the more recent Drawn and Quarterly books, are available at your library. So if you just want to read it and you don't want to buy it, I would definitely check out that option. I've read a lot of these at the library and decided to pick them up. And like I said, if you want to read a really outstanding article about his life and his impact on manga, Ryan Holberg wrote a wonderful piece in 2015 after his death, and I recommend that highly. It's much better than anything that I could even conceive of doing. And so I hope you enjoy this, and this is it. If you are aware of any other English translated Yoshihiro Tatsumi stories that I did not cover, or any books, please let me know, because I will hunt it down, okay, and I will get it. Thank you very much.